The movie that we'd really like to see is The Wolf of Stars Hollow. Am I right? Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor, and I'll be your host as we go through all of the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the channel, I recommend you check out the introduction video. There's a link to it in the description below, and it's going to give you a pretty good overview about what the Horror Movie Syllabus does. In short, we look at a particular subgenre of horror, and then we pick 3 movies from that subgenre to explore. But this is our Is It Syllabus-Worthy series. This is where I take a horror movie recommendation from you guys, something that you leave in the comments to one of my videos, something that I haven't seen before. I check it out for the first time, and then I let you know, is it syllabus-worthy? Is there something about it that makes it interesting enough, noteworthy enough, etc., to be on the horror movie syllabus? And today the movie that we're looking at is The Wolf of Snow Hollow. And The Wolf of Snow Hollow was recommended to me by my friend Steve, who knows that I like a good werewolf movie. So that's the clue. That's what I had going into this. The knowledge that I had going into this movie is it's a werewolf movie. And I also knew that it was a bit more recent. It was a newer movie. And that was it. I didn't have any knowledge. I'd never heard of this movie before. I didn't know anything else about it. I didn't check out any trailers. I didn't check out any reviews until after I watched the movie. I didn't, I went in as blind as possible, because that's what we do for this series, is just kind of try to give the movie its fair shake on its own with minimal knowledge. And so that's what I did here. I went in knowing that it's going to be a werewolf movie. And that's all I had to go on. And, honestly, that's enough, because I love me a werewolf movie. Steve's right. I do enjoy werewolf movies quite a bit. We've done quite a few of them on the channel, some really good ones, which sets the bar kind of high for making it onto the horror movie syllabus for a werewolf movie, frankly. But did I like this one? Did I hate it? Well, let's find out. Like I said, the movie that we're looking at today is The Wolf of Snow Hollow. The Wolf of Snow Hollow came out in 2020 and was written and directed by a man named Jim Cummings, who I'm not terribly familiar with, and apparently he made his bones or got his notoriety from a movie called Thunder Road, which I've never seen, I'm not familiar with at all, and so I don't really know him or I'm familiar with his work, but apparently he's got a bit of a style or a thing about him, and I think that comes out pretty clearly in this movie. I think his thing is on display pretty prominently in this movie, so we're going to get into all that in just a second. First, if you haven't seen it before, the movie takes place in a small, idyllic mountain town in Utah that is suddenly besieged by what seems to be a large animal, possibly a wolf, possibly a werewolf. That's what the locals think, and everybody's pretty freaked out, but the sheriff investigating the case doesn't think that's it. He defies all of the evidence that he's seeing, because he just thinks something else is the case and refuses to believe what's going on, even though everybody else is kind of telling him he's wrong. But he's got a lot on his plate anyways, with a lot of family drama. He's tackling some alcoholism. He's got a lot going on. And so is that affecting his judgment and his investigation? We'll go ahead and stop there so as to not spoil the movie for anybody. But the movie is a bit of an odd duck. It's a strange tone of the movie. And that's by design. I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing. Most of the reviews and whatnot categorize this as a horror comedy. And I think, broadly speaking, high level, that is an accurate description of this movie, as it does have elements of both horror and comedy, but it really does have just a strange mix of tones. It's got a lot of drama in it, sneaky drama. We'll get to that in a little bit. And then it's got a lot of just like weirdly campy or bizarre things. And when I was reading reviews about it, one of the comparisons that kept coming up was the Coen brothers, specifically Fargo. And I think that comparison is pretty apt. Yeah, there's like the locale, like the kind of wintry locale that kind of evokes feelings of Fargo, but it's really the quirky characters and the kind of bizarre offbeat tone that really resonates for me as a Coen Brothers-esque story, specifically mostly Fargo. And that works. It works for me. The movie's shot rather well. Again, it's got this idyllic locale. It's really beautiful. This location is just gorgeous. And it's shot somewhat slightly stylishly. I wouldn't go as far as to call it like auteur style. It's not like David Lynch or something like that going on here. But it's shot well. It looks good. And it's somewhat imaginative. And they've got, these scenes with the werewolf that are shot in a way so as to kind of hide what is probably low budget effects for the most part. And it kind of comes off a little bit like, Steven Spielberg with Jaws, a little bit, kind of a little bit of less is more approach. The wolf and the gore looks good, but you don't see it a lot. It's kind of held back a lot. And what you do see is effective as a result of that. So it's shot really well. And it gives you this kind of feeling of this is going to sound weird to say, a better movie than it is. And what I mean by that is a higher budget, more seasoned production than it actually is, because I think this is maybe Jim Cummings' second movie. And it feels like it's done a little bit more confidently than that. But that all leads to this very odd tone, because when you get to the story and specifically the characters, it feels really offbeat and really bizarre. And again, in a good way, but it's an odd adjustment. It's a little off-putting at first, because you've got all these characters and they're all playing it pretty big. Their dialogue is kind of hyper real, and they're delivering that dialogue in kind of a big, almost caricature-y way. And again, by design, on purpose. And I do think for the most part that it's working. The characters are interesting. They're dynamic. They're strange. Again, kind of not to evoke David Lynch too much, but a little bit Twin Peaksy in the quirkiness of the town and the inhabitants of the town. And I like that. I love me some Twin Peaks, so I'm kind of down for that. The whole thing has a slight surreal feel to it. There's a passage of time in this movie, and it's not clear how much time is passing. Is it a couple days? Is it a couple weeks? Is it a couple months? I'm not quite clear, but it kind of gives it almost a dreamlike feel, which is just enhanced by, again, the way this movie is shot and the snowy exteriors and everything like that. It really does kind of give it this like dreamlike ambiance that kind of makes the movie feel a little more surreal. But then you've got this kind of grounded murder investigation that is leaning towards werewolf, so you get this creature feature aspect to it. It's kind of all over the map, but it doesn't feel like a mess. It just feels like odd and kind of frankly fresh and interesting. And you incorporate all of these big like Fargo-esque kind of caricature characters into it, and it just becomes like this. It rides the line of becoming like this weird farce, but it doesn't really quite slide in there. And I credit that a lot to a really strong cast of character actors that are all doing pretty solid to good work here. The actor who's leading it is Jim Cummings, and we'll get to him in a second, but there's a lot of supporting actors here. Robert Forster's here. He's always doing good work, and he's bringing a certain gravitas to this movie that, frankly, it may not deserve. And then there's Ricky Lindholm, who is from Garfunkel Notes. I love Garfunkel Notes, so I'm a fan. And she's doing this really hilarious deadpan thing that is working for me. She's a scene stealer in this movie for me. There's Chloe East, who just recently showed up in Heretic. I loved Heretic. It was a great movie. And she's doing solid work here as the teenage daughter, or the young adult daughter of the sheriff, who's Jim Cummings' character. And so there's a lot of supporting characters who are doing a lot with very little. And like I said, the dialogue's a little bit weird. In fact, it's maybe not great, but they're selling it by their performances. And the performances are not just unilaterally big and caricature. They're just different levels of big in a way that does work for me, because it kind of gives levels. It's not like everybody's just doing the same thing. They all have different quirks and personality traits and aspects that make them able to be differentiated and makes them compelling, makes them interesting. Now, where there's maybe a little bit of a weak link is Jim Cummings. And I say maybe because I'm not sure how I feel about it, because he is pretty funny in this movie. He comes off as like the strong leading man type, but then he's just ridiculous. He's ridiculous in this movie. But he's also a little bit extra. He has this kind of, he goes really big and sometimes kind of like nonsensically so. And a large part of this movie's story is hinging on the fact that he won't believe in werewolves, where everybody else is seeing werewolves. And so it gets to a point where it gets a little bit frustrating. His obstinance gets it wears a little thin. Like his disbelief and his rejection of evidence gets kind of ridiculous. And it's important because the movie hinges on him. He is the central character. And so if you don't like him, you're going to have a rough time. And I find him writing the line for me, because you've got like this behavior from him that's a little bit hard to swallow, but you've also got some explanation from his background, like why he might be the way he is or acting the way he is, because he's having marital issues. He's having issues with his daughter and trying to relate to her. His father, who's Robert Forster, who is the previous sheriff, he's retiring and he's ill. He's got some debilitating illness that is going to force him to retire. And Jim Cummings' character is struggling with all of this. And it's interesting to see this movie kind of sneak in a surprising amount of heart. There's some drama in here that actually really works. It's really, really good. It's an odd mix because you've got these ridiculous characters kind of doing the big, again, I say Fargo-esque, not because they're acting like Fargo, but because they're just kind of almost zany characters. But then you're sneaking in some really serious father-son drama stuff and mortality things and family drama that's really, really good. Now, I'll be honest, Jim Cummings is funny. He's not as strong when it comes to the serious stuff. He doesn't nail it, but he's not a detriment. He's not awful. It's not like you're watching him and you're just taking out of the movie, like you just don't buy into him. He's not going to win an Oscar, you know what I mean? But he's fine there. Whereas the funny stuff, I think, is where he really is. That's his thing. I was talking about he has a thing. His thing is like offbeat, strange humor, but that's done by like weird responses or reactions and quirky dialogues like that. I think that's kind of his thing. So when he tries to do some of the serious stuff with his dad in the movie or with his daughter in the movie, it's not as good. But it's still solid stuff, and partly because the other actors are bringing it too. So the father-son stuff works really well. The alcoholism stuff that he's dealing with works pretty well. The stuff with his daughter is maybe a little bit undercooked, if I'm being honest with you. It kind of is the crux of the climax of the movie, and it leads to an ending that I won't spoil, of course, but feels a little bit limp. Like the ending left me a little kind of meh, but the earlier themes, the alcoholism, the father-son stuff works really well. The father-daughter themes feel like they needed a little bit more work, just a little bit. Again, I don't think, it doesn't derail the movie. It doesn't ruin anything, but it is noticeable that, again, that's where I think the shortcoming is I like the heart that's in this movie. I just wish it was sold a little bit better. And yet maybe if it was, maybe it would be a little bit more off-putting in this bizarre, odd mix of a movie and its tones. But here's the thing. I think those tones are an interesting thing. But does interesting equal syllabus-worthy? Well, let's find out. So, is The Wolf of Snow Hollow syllabus-worthy? Maybe? Nothing in this movie is great or amazing, but it still feels kind of like fresh and original and interesting because of this odd tone, because of what I think is attributable to Jim Cummings, like his kind of quirky style. That makes it feel kind of unique. The movie is not super well known. It doesn't seem like a lot of people talk about it, but it does have good reviews. So the people who do see it seem to like it. I liked it. I liked it quite a bit. I had a really good time with this movie. Like I said, there's some nits to pick, and I picked them. But overall, I think the movie's solidly good. And the question is it good enough? And I'll be honest, the werewolf subgenre is a tough one, man. That's a high bar. It's going to be hard to break in that subgenre, and I don't think this one makes the grade in that area. So then the question is, where would it fit? And we talked about it's described as a horror comedy. Maybe a horror comedy would work. There's an actual mystery to this movie that is kind of like underplayed in the movie to its benefit, and then kind of pays off, I think. So maybe in the mystery subgenre. Argument for dysfunctional family subgenre, that I think there's a strong argument for dysfunctional family, even though it's kind of played sometimes for laughs. Like that heart that's weaved in throughout the movie, kind of that subtext of family drama is really good. And so maybe you could squeeze it in there. And if you hear in my voice that I'm trying to find a place for it, it's because I am. Because I think I'd like to try to squeeze it on the syllabus, because it's unique enough and interesting enough that I'd want to find a space for it on the syllabus. It's just not necessarily the easiest thing to find a space for because of stiff competition. Like I said, it's going to fall short of the werewolf subgenre. It just is. So could I find another place for it? And I'd be inclined to. So I guess my answer is it Syllabus-Worthy? Yeah, it might have struggled to squeeze itself on there. Maybe it winds up as an extra credit more than an actual movie on the syllabus, but I would be inclined to find a way to get it on there because I liked it enough and I thought that the vibe of it, that tone, that odd tone, was enough to push it over the top. Everything else, the gore is fine, it's solid. The werewolf effects, good. The performance is fun. So the shot well. Everything about it is good. There's really, like I said, only the minor nitpicks of it, and it's like Jim Cummings not being the greatest thespian in the world, and some of the script stuff being could use a little tightening. But other than that, it's a fun ride. So whether you put it on your syllabus or not, you should definitely check it out. It's definitely worth your time, especially if you like werewolf movies, if you like quirky movies, if you like Coen Brothers stuff. I would definitely say check this one out. I think you'll have a really good time with this one. So check it out. Let me know what you think. But that's going to be my thoughts on The Wolf of Snow Hollow. Like I said, had a really good time. It's definitely worth the hour and a half or so that it is. So again, check it out. Let me know what you think. But thanks, Steve, for the recommendation. And yeah, had a good time with this one. But now I think it's time to have a good time with the Horror Trivia Pursuit card. If you've been to the channel before, you probably know that I like to take a Horror Trivia Pursuit card and read it live on camera and then try to answer it live on camera and hopefully not embarrass myself. So we're going to do that right now. And we're going to look at the killer category. And if you know, Wolf of Snow Hollow. But let's go ahead and check out the question. The question is this. What is the name of the actor that played Dr. Sam Loomis in 1978's Halloween? Okay, so for a horror fan, this is a softball question, I would presume. Like, pretty much everybody knows this, right? Like, if you're a horror fan, you know this one, unless you're just not into like slasher movies at all. This is such a famous and by extension obvious answer that you know it, right? Everybody knows this one. I'm prattling on in case you're thinking about it, but you either know this or you don't. I think like 90% or more of you are going to know the answer to this one. Like, it might have been harder if they asked who played Dr. Sam Loomis in the Rob Zombie remake. But yeah, Dr. Sam Loomis, very famous character, very famous movie. We've talked about it many times. This movie is one of my favorites. John Carpenter directed. I love this movie. And yeah, this actor is iconic. So, I'm kind of treading water here. But you guys know this one, right? Like a legendary actor. So, let's not spend a lot of time. Lock in the answer. Pens down. I'm going to go ahead and make my answer. My answer is, of course, Donald Pleasance, who played Dr. Sam Loomis in 1978 Halloween. And it is, according to the card, Donald Pleasance. So, yeah, that one's an easy one. Like I said, it might have been harder to be asking for Malcolm McDowell from the remake, but okay, so they can't always be hard, and frankly, I could use a softball every now and then to get me a win, but that one doesn't even make me look smart, just makes me look like, I'm an actual average horror fan. So anyways, if you got it wrong, please let me know what you answered. Did you say Malcolm McDowell? Because that would be kind of funny. But let me know your wrong answers in the comments below. But also let me know if you've got any other cool recommendations for me, werewolf or otherwise. I'm having a really good time with the recommendations. This one was particularly good. Thank you again, Steve. And just keep those recommendations coming because I'm having a blast with these, sharing my thoughts with you. And you guys seem to enjoy them too. So thank you guys very much for that. And thank you for watching till the end of the video. Until next week, I'm going to do something completely different. Let's just say class dismissed. The movie that we would really like to see is The Wolf of Stars Hollow. That was a good take, buddy.